Hello, and welcome to the Office of the Patriot. In this office, we try to make sense out of the nonsense of the progressive left and RINO right. In almost all of my previous episodes, I identify, define, and dissect a problem. In this episode, the problem is the political hit job trial against Donald Trump, more insidiously known as the hush money trial. During my presentations, I offer solutions, usually using a tried and true investigative method that involves finding the who, what, where, when, how, and why of the issue. But everyone knows the answers using this investigative method as it relates to the trial. So in this episode of Office of the Patriot, we're going to come at this from a different tack. What should be done about this miscarriage of justice, and who is responsible to correct it? The news cycle has been saturated with the Trump hush money trial since it began, so I'm not going to get into the specifics too deeply, but they do need to be addressed. In 2018, Bragg began his campaign for the position of Attorney General of New York by touting previous court cases he was involved in against the Trump administration and his desire to prosecute Trump after gaining office. So even before the case started, he had his fingers on the scales of justice. For what it's worth, he was actually going after Trump for perceived tax violation crimes that were being investigated by his predecessor, Attorney General Vance, which obviously never came to fruition. Instead, he went after Trump for alleged hush money payments that were made to two people through Michael Cohen, one of Trump's many attorneys, a doorman employed at Trump Tower, and Stormy Daniels, to allegedly influence an election, whatever the hell that means. I mean, if anyone here can name a politician who has not tried to silence or refute bad publicity during his or her campaign, please go ahead and put a link in the comment section below. It's not likely you'll find one. As we move into the trial, we find that very little exculpatory evidence is allowed to be admitted by the Trump defense team. In fact, a signed declaration by Stormy Daniels that refutes her own testimony was excluded from being presented as evidence. The link to that document is included in the description section below. And the last time I checked, exculpatory evidence was supposed to be presented to the jury for review, not excluded by a judge. That must have been the day that both Bragg and Mershon were absent when their professors lectured about evidence. There are so many damn holes in this case that a sieve holds more water. There are procedural errors from the judge as it relates to jury instructions, which allowed for jurors to combine components of the charges to come to a guilty finding for each count. The jury was pooled from a primarily liberal area, and they already knew the circumstances of this case, so compiling an impartial jury of his peers was an impossibility. Couple this with Sixth Amendment violations for failing to inform the defendant of the specific crime he's charged with, and even before the trial begins, you have appealable violations. And speaking of violations, one of the factors the jury was instructed in was to find campaign finance violations. This is not the province of local or state governments. It's federal law, which is the province of the federal judicial system. Here's liberal CNN validating some of my points.
I want to go into the weeds. Hear from the jury instructions. I'm going to put this up on the screen. I'll read it aloud. In determining whether the defendant conspired to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, you may consider the following: violations of the Federal Election Campaign Act, otherwise known as FECA, the falsification of other business records, or violation of tax laws. Now I'm putting on the screen one portion of the verdict slip so that people can see it was a binary choice on each of the 34 counts. And here's my question. Based on the verdict slip, Trump can truthfully say he doesn't know for what he was convicted. Do you agree?
I do agree, and I think we all have that issue. Now, that verdict slip that we just looked at is deceptively simple in its layout. It's a binary choice. Guilty, not guilty, yes, no. But in fact, the charges here are much more complicated. So think of them like if it was a triple-decker sandwich. There's 3 actual layers to each of the 34 counts here. The first layer is a New York State violation of falsifying business records, which is a misdemeanor. The middle layer is, well, they falsified business records in order to violate New York election law, which says you can't try to influence an election by, quote, unlawful means. Well, what are those unlawful means? That brings us to the third layer, which is the sort of 3-part menu that you just showed us. And the judge told the jury, the prosecutor's argument was, well, it could be one, both, or all 3, or maybe some combination of federal campaign finance law, falsifying other business records, which doesn't really make much sense to me, or some sort of tax violation. So we don't know which of those 3 options the jury voted to convict on, and the judge said you don't have to be unanimous as long as you agree it was one of those 3. So there's a lot of uncertainty in what the jury actually decided.
You're the expert when it comes to matters of prosecution. Do you agree with me that this is a legitimate appellate issue for Trump? He can put it in the way that I put it. I don't know for what I was convicted.
There are 2 appellate issues here. The first one is what you said. Look, a basic fundamental principle of our criminal law process, of our Constitution, is a defendant is entitled to notice in advance of trial with specificity what he's being charged for, what he's being tried for. That's why we have indictments. Now, the indictment in this case does not specify what the underlying quote unquote unlawful means are. And in fact, and I found this to be shocking, frankly, the judge did not make the prosecutors commit to any of those unlawful means until we were just about into closing arguments. So that's going to be appeal issue number 1. I was never put on specific notice of what I was being tried for. Appeal argument number 2 is going to be this. One of the bases for conviction here, one of the unlawful means, is a violation of the Federal Election and Campaign Act. Do you know how many times, Michael, we have ever had in the history of this country a state or county level prosecutor charge either as a charge or a subcomponent or an unlawful means or any part of a charge a violation of federal campaign law? The answer was 0.
Probably
now
never.
It's 1. So this is the first, yes,
right.
Exactly. This is the first time in American history that's been done. And the appeals argument will be when you have a federal regulatory structure around elections, that's for the feds to violate. That's not for state, or in this case, county. Alvin Bragg is a county level prosecutor to enforce, because that would lead to mayhem and that would create problems for federalism, for the notion that federal law has to, no pun intended, trump state and local law.
Next, you have evidence that was admitted that had no bearing on tax withholding crimes, hush money payments, or campaign violations. That was only used to slander the defendant. And finally, you have a gag order that was placed on Trump during an election cycle, which prohibited him from speaking out about the case during his campaign speeches. That same order was not placed on witnesses that were hostile to Trump's defense. These were witnesses that were subpoenaed by the prosecution, a disgraced and disbarred lawyer, and a washed-up porn actress who saw The Sixth Sense maybe one too many times.
I see dead people.
Mike, I'm sure I missed a few appealable components of this sham trial, so please go ahead and fill in some of the blanks.
Speaking to your last statement regarding the gag order, before I lose my train of thought, that very fact that the judge did not gag every witness is a clear statement of, it's anti-Trump bias, plain and simple. But what still blows me away is the bizarre jury instructions, which I can honestly state I still don't understand. I mean, I know what you were saying, but I mean, I guarantee you 99% of the public even if you told them about it, you would need to recite it over and over and over. People are not going to get it. So that to me is ridiculous. And I don't understand how paying off a porn star is a crime. In fact, I don't think it is a crime. I haven't found, I looked it up. I couldn't find anywhere where paying someone off to shut up and sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, is not a crime. It's just a private agreement. So they stretched this bullshit charge out to indicate sole intent was to prevent voters from finding out about it. So how in the fuck can they know that? Number one, most men would primarily do this to prevent, embarrassment to their wife or to their family, or bad blood between the people in the family, and just wanting to be private about it. So, like you said, they're trying to bury bad news, and it's been done by the vast majority of all elected politicians for as long as there was politics. The sad truth is, Bill Clinton, paid off. If Bill Clinton paid off Paula Jones instead of doing um, the decades long, I think it was going on 20 something years, this lawsuit that she had. So they came to a private settlement, but if that had been handled the same way, the accused Trump of doing, the libtards wouldn't have batted an eye because he's on their team. Um, but this was their chance to get the bad orange man, right? So to me, the
Absolutely.
top five appealable issues are: number one, the gag order was only issued against Trump, like you said, nobody else. Number two, the change of venue request was denied. Um, that is, I mean, that should have been a no-brainer, and the judge just shot it down. So that there was no way he could have gotten a fair trial. There's absolutely no way. Number three, the Stormy Daniels testimony, it was unnecessary and it added nothing to the prosecution's case. So I think it's pretty clear the intent was to damage Trump's character and paint him as a bad person. I think everybody sees that for what it is. Um, Number four, Michael Cohen's testimony. So this guy's a multiple felon convicted of lying to Congress and to prosecution. So how he has any credibility is beyond me. And lastly, the defense's star witness from the FEC. This is really important. That witness was prevented from testifying fully with regard to his expertise, which is the fucking federal election rules.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now we get to the meat and potatoes of this episode. What can be done about this bullshit trial and who will have to do it? And I'm going to be honest, I'm not really crazy about what I'm going to suggest because I've always been a believer in our criminal justice system. For what it's worth, I'm not disillusioned to believe that it is a flawless system. However, it is arguably the most just system in the world when the people who are entrusted to uphold the law do it without partisan bias. And today, it's pretty evident that doesn't happen. Justice today has a very fine-edged sword that has been used by progressive liberal hacks in positions of power to cut down conservative opponents. And this is where I say we must employ the exact same sword because it does have two edges. Now, for the idiots in the audience who believe or wish to take my words out of context, sword, as it relates to what I'm talking about in this episode, is the weaponization of the law to be employed by prosecutors and judges for political purposes. It is not a literal sword constructed of a metallic alloy to be wielded by a person to cut someone. I'm not advocating or condoning the use of violence to move a political agenda. I am advocating the use of the criminal justice system in the exact same way the Democratic Party has employed it. There are countless Democrats that are in political positions of power and or influence that have been or are currently involved in unlawful behavior. So I call upon conservative federal, state, and local prosecutors to take up the same mantle that was used against Trump and employ it with the same ruthless vigor that has been used against conservatives as of late. This recommendation is not just because of the Trump trial. His trial is just the straw that broke the camel's back. There are hundreds of Americans that have fallen victim to unhinged leftist attack prosecutors and judges, most J6 detainees, Julian Assange, and a recent conviction of a 76-year-old woman who was convicted of trespassing and sentenced to 2 years in prison for, wait for it, singing hymns in front of an abortion clinic. All the while, hundreds of BLM and Antifa thugs, leftist unhinged college students, and LGBTQ plus educators flagrantly violate the law with impunity and suffer no consequence. So, assaulting and battering people, destroying property, and theft are all excusable crimes if committed by the correct political party, in this case, the Democrat Party. Mike, do you think I'm being too harsh or maybe not harsh enough?
Oh, not harsh enough at all. Um, so, you know that I've said many times that I'm militantly anti-communist or anti-liberal because I know how they think, because I
We.
used to be one. Um, it, it's crystal clear that they are at war with all of us. So they intend to break society with their will, and are using the justice system to attack us with the intent to make us either give up or destroy us. In my opinion, that's what you do in war. You make the people give up, or you destroy them. So at this point, we have no other option. We have, short of a bloody civil war, we have to fight them. So um, I'm in total agreement with you. What we need to do is pressure all of our elected officials. A lot of them are going to be kind of useless, but pressure does help. But most importantly, the local and county district attorneys to actively pursue legal action against all of these motherfuckers. I mean, they opened Pandora's box, and I know for a fact that they will never stop doing what they're doing. They're going to keep going and going and going until they're dead. In fact, I think it's going to get even worse. So, thinking from a warfare perspective, there's only a couple things. There can only be a truce if both sides have had enough. And right now, they're running roughshod over society and conservatives. The conservatives just don't seem willing to fight back. So, to me, two things have to happen. Number one, uh, all the non-communists, which is everybody except for Democrats, and well, even some Democrats are not libtards, but most of them are. So everybody else, they need to move their businesses and their families out of these leftist shithole cities and states, and get to people. Surround themselves with people that are at least reasonable, or preferably like-minded in most respects. So that means basically conservative leaning areas of the country. Um, or two, step two is going to be war. We're at war. So, in my opinion, we need to go to war with them. We need to beat them first.
Agreed. I can't say it better. And we can't afford to play by the same rules when the opposition breaks them with impunity. There's entirely too much at stake. It's only when liberal politicians and bureaucrats start feeling the sting of the laws they've broken, irrespective of the spirit of the law, maybe, just maybe, they will pull back and realize that this is a path that should not be traveled. Because a just criminal justice system is the bedrock of a functioning civilization. And if people lose faith in its ability to be wielded fairly and impartially, then the basis of our constitutional republic will be a sham. It'll be a banana republic. And that will eventually fall into chaos. This concludes today's presentation of Office of the Patriot. If you enjoyed the content, please take the time to like, subscribe, and share our channel on your social media. It is appreciated. Also, please take the time to comment. Engagement is the major metric social media platforms like YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, you name it, employ in their search algorithms. The more people that like and comment, the more the Office of the Patriot channel comes up when social and political content like this is searched for. And as always, have a blessed day and stay safe out there.